When I retired about 15 years ago, I was looking for things to do, and the Alexandria city archaeologist was looking for somebody to develop a walking tour of Alexandria sites associated with George Washington. So I agreed to undertake that project, and I spent about 2 years researching Alexandria history, and I came up with 140 sites. And I think she was looking for a brochure, but I ended up writing a book. It's called Walking with Washington, and it, of course, contains walking tours of Alexandria sites associated with George Washington. George Washington enjoyed a long 50-year relationship with Alexandria. From the time Alexandria was founded in 1749, when he was 17, until he died in 1799 at the age of 67. He participated in the political life of the city. He was a trustee of Alexandria, and he was a justice of the peace of Fairfax County. He represented Alexandria in the Houses of Burgesses, the Virginia legislature. And even when he was president, he made sure that when they chose this area to be the new site of the nation's capital, that Alexandria was included in the original District of Columbia. The George Washington National Masonic Memorial towers over the city, and Alexandria has the largest George Washington's birthday parade in the nation. Alexandrians like to say that this is George Washington's hometown. The three locations we're going to look at today include Carlyle House, where George Washington slept there and dined there many times. We're going to go to Gadsby's Tavern, which is probably George Washington's favorite tavern here in Alexandria, and to Christ Church, where he worshiped regularly. This is Carlyle House, and yes, George Washington did sleep here. Carlyle House was built by John Carlyle, who was one of the founders of Alexandria. And George Washington's big brother, Lawrence Washington, also was a founder of Alexandria. Lawrence Washington's wife was a sister of John Carlyle's wife, so you know the two families got together frequently. The Carlyles would go to Mount Vernon, the Washingtons would come here. If you look in George Washington's account book, you can see how much he would tip Carlyle's slaves, Sam and Bridget, when he stayed all night here. And even after John Carlyle died in 1780, George Washington continued to come here to visit with members of the Carlyle family. He came here to dine with Carlyle's daughters and her family. Let's go inside and see where George Washington would dine with John Carlyle. This is the dining room of Carlyle House, where George Washington dined many times. This room is all original hand-carved woodwork, original flooring. There's no subflooring. You see the office down below. The colors are based on paint analysis. It's the actual color it was when George Washington dined here. And this is an important room in American history. In 1755, General Braddock came to town for the French and Indian War. And he chose Carlyle House to be his headquarters because this was the grandest house in town. And General Braddock called a conference of the colonial governors. Again, John Carlyle wrote to his brother George back in England, this was the grandest Congress ever held on this continent up until then. And it probably was the grandest Congress until the Continental Congress in Philadelphia 20 years later. And 5 colonial governors came and met in this room to plan the French and Indian War. And one of the things they talked about was how to pay for the war. And what they suggested was taxing the colonists. And you remember taxation without representations? So you can trace the beginnings of the American Revolution back to this room. And now the room is set up for dinner. And so this is the way it would have been when George Washington came here for dinner. When he and Martha and the family would come, it would very much might be like this. He not only dined here, but he also dined at various taverns around town. So let's go over and see Gadsby's Tavern, which is probably George Washington's favorite tavern. This is Gadsby's Tavern, probably George Washington's favorite tavern. He dined here frequently. There was a tavern on this site as early as in the early 1770s. And the current building where the museum is today was built circa 1785. And the new addition on the corner was added in 1792. So the new addition is over 200 years old too. Besides George Washington, some of the famous people who had dined here included John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, and James Monroe. Thomas Jefferson had his inaugural dinner here. John Gadsby had a terrific reputation for hospitality. He was known for the really great dinners that he would serve. So he was well known all over the area. And that's why the presidents of the United States would come here, because it was probably the best place to eat in this entire area. He left here to establish restaurants in Baltimore and then in Washington City. Well, when you think about George Washington, you always think of him as winning the Revolutionary War and being the president and being this real stiff character on your dollar bill. But here's at Gadsby's Tavern, what's neat about Gadsby's Tavern is you see him as a human being. You see him dining and drinking, having a glass of Madeira, dancing. He loved to dance, telling stories, meeting his friends here, having conversations. You see him as a real person here at Gadsby's Tavern, and not as a statue by Houdon. Well, we're in right now the ballroom of Gadsby's Tavern, and George Washington loved to dance. And all the ladies really wanted to dance with him. To dance with the most famous person in the United States was a big thrill. And they had birthday balls here for George Washington in 1798 and 1799. And he and Martha came here for birthday balls. When George Washington was here for a ball, the music would have been up on the gallery, which is kind of neat. To get onto the musicians gallery, there's a ladder out in the hallway. You have to go up and through the door to get into there. It would have been packed. The Virginians loved to dance. And to have a dance that George Washington was going to be at, everybody would have come. So this would have been the highlight of the social season, to come to a ball with George Washington. In my book, Walking with Washington, we mention a number of Alexandria sites associated with George Washington. And so now we're going to go to Christ Church, where he would worship. Now we're standing in front of Christ Church, which George Washington attended frequently. But today it's an active church, and you can still go to church services here on Sundays. And when they're not having church services here, you can come and go inside and sit in George Washington's pew. This church was built between 1767 and 1773. And when it was built, it was known as the Little Church in the Woods because it was on the outskirts of Alexandria. Today it's in downtown Alexandria. You can hear all the traffic noise. This is George Washington's pew in Christ Church. He purchased pew number 5 for 36 pounds, 10 shillings. He'd be sitting here with his family, Martha, and depending on what time of his life it is, it would be her children or her grandchildren. So it probably would have been a pretty full pew if you had the whole family here. George Washington was baptized in the Anglican Church at the age of 2 months. He was married in the Anglican Church, and he was buried in the Episcopal Church. His religious life was what you'd expect of a man of his means. He supported the church financially and also helped out poor people. And he supported, as president, he supported religious freedom. We've only looked at a small number of the sites discussed in my book, Walking with Washington. But I sort of want people to realize that George Washington was all over Alexandria. George Washington was really an important part of Alexandria, and Alexandria was very important to George Washington as well.